Now, Nigeria faces a mixed outlook as it approaches 2027. The economy shows signs of recovery with growth supported by services, non-oil industries and rising oil production, though inflation and poverty remain pressing challenges. Security remains a key concern with insurgency, banditry and kidnappings, stretching resources and prompting cooperation with international partners. Politically, the ruling APC has strengthened its position, while opposition parties like the PDP, Labour Party and NNPP struggle with defections, internal divisions and leadership disputes, weakening multi-party competition. Efforts to form coalitions are ongoing but fragmented, leaving questions about the strength and unity of the opposition ahead of the general elections. Overall, Nigeria's path forward depends on stable security, economic reforms and political cohesion, which will determine whether growth and prosperity reach citizens in the decade ahead.
Well, let's have a conversation on the state of the nation. We're joined live in the studio by Ememobong. He is the National Publicity Secretary of the People's Democratic Party. Welcome on Daybreak, Mr. Ememobong.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Now, let's start from what looks like a courage, something like shifting politics away from governance, with the climate statement the president did make yesterday at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. He has said that the climate action must align with the renewed energy transition program, and he had also shown the investment appetite on this climate deal towards the net carbon emission against 2060, and also showing and indicating that now trade would now be on Nigeria's own terms, that extractive merchants should now bring value to the Nigerian economy. Do you think that is the way to go?
Well, truthfully, you know that with the energy transition debate, where Africa has a position with regards to energy justice, energy equity, I mean, that line is commonplace, is popular. But we're hoping that we see beyond the rhetorics. We see the president bring life to these aspirations. And you see, when you're speaking in a foreign land and you're pushing the rhetoric, we must back home be able to see the commensurate work that provides the basis, the foundation for that rhetoric, so that it doesn't just end as a discussion, a position paper, and a posturing there. Because when you look at where we are in terms of energy, and you look at what we need, the deficit between what we need and what we are producing, and you look at the fact that we are having the collapse of our national grid almost as regular than public holidays. In fact, I think it comes more regularly now than weekends. So you're going to begin to ask yourself, between the rhetoric, the aspiration, and if we want to be fair to the president, you begin to speak about, okay, beyond the aspiration, what are we doing with converting potential into actual force? So, yes, on our terms, when you get on a negotiation, what would determine whether the negotiation comes your way is your start point. Where are you at the moment? Are you self-sufficient? Are you capable of matching the other party, you know, on different terms that the negotiation will now come you know, in your favor, which is why negotiations are not always, people prepare very well for negotiations so that you're on a balance as you get there. So we would be glad to see the negotiations about energy transition and people bringing value, so that we don't just export the crude materials like we're doing with crude oil without adding value to it. But I mean, it's an aspiration, noble aspiration. We hope to see how that pans out in real life and how it affects the local economy, how it affects the average Nigerian, so that people are not just speaking about things that sound good to the ear, that are good sound bites for the news, but things that are good for the average Nigerian who is living in Nigeria.
Now, moving on from negotiation to actual agreements, that Sustainability Week event has seen a lot coming out of it. So Nigeria has signed an agreement with the UAE for Nigerian exporters to have duty-free access to over 7,000 products in that part of the world, which is a sort of a foot in the door for Nigerian manufacturers. I'd like your view or your take on this latest development.
Again, that sounds very good, that you have an open market to go into and exports free. But you're going to ask yourself, how's the manufacturing industry doing back home? Because when you're looking at exports, you're looking at manufacturing at home and taking it there. So in terms of power, which we've just spoken about, there's absolutely no way you're going to have the capacity to do manufacturing without power. And the cheapest source of power is usually the public power. How available is that public power? When you look at the cost of running generator or alternative power, whether you're going to look at solar, any alternative power system you're going to bring, that is why you have artificial pricing in our country, where you see that when immediately you factor in the cost of power, the cost of energy, it's going to shoot your price up. So the ability for these Nigerian-made products, to compete favorably. Remember that you're now going on an international space where price is a critical issue, quality is a critical issue. And so a lot of factors would have to, so yes, you now have a market, but you need to come back to talk about the product. Or in what ways are we preparing the production structure, the ecosystem, locally? What incentives are we going to give to Manufacturers Association of Nigeria and the people who are there? Who are we looking at? Are we looking at the big players already? Okay, even if we're looking at the big players, how about the support system, which is going to be the base of the pyramid? How do we factor all of this in? Are we using the Chinese model, where you're looking at small cottage industries? Then you now have the middle people, who are the middle companies, who are able to aggregate the small and begin to interact with the larger community. I mean, it's a whole lot of work that has to be done beyond just the agreement. We see in our country most times where government starts from the top and comes down. So what preparations were made in the past two years that this administration has been, in preparation for this agreement? So now you now have an agreement, you are now going to have to be scouting for people who can benefit from this agreement. Rather, opportunity should always meet preparation, not vice versa. So let's have a situation where we have a prepared, base that can accept what is coming. So good aspiration again, but like you said, we need to see how this fits in. How many manufacturers are going to have the capacity to be able to take benefit of this?
Well, good aspirations indeed. We look forward to how that develops. Now let's pivot the subject matter just a little bit and speak about the PDP and its current health status. Now the PDP has been struggling, as it is very well known, and it has literally been a party that's on its knees at the moment, especially with all the defections and all the internal disputes. Can you tell us, how bad is the crisis really?
Well, clearly life is a curve, and that's how we see it. So, and when you see a curve, it starts down, it goes up, then comes down again and continues that way. So we started from a point like every other political party in 1998, where we had nothing, and the people invested their trust, hopes, and aspirations in us. And we had governors. At that time, we came out as Nigeria's dominant party. We won the presidency, won majority of governorship, won elections across the country, and began and ruled for 16 years. Then we had a slope. And so from 2015, the party has been on a slope. And so, but what I can tell you is that immediately you hit the bottom of the slope, the next movement is up. And you know that the speed with which you're coming down will determine the speed with which you're going up. So I can tell you that the Turaki-led administration is having a rebirth and a rebound process. This is very intentional. It's not an easy ride up, because you know that if you're sliding down, you don't even need to rev the engines. The car will be going down because it's supported by the slide. But when you're coming out, it takes a lot of energy to come up, and that is where we are now. So momentum gathering is happening, and we are using the poly-opportunity construct, where we are doing diverse things towards a central goal, while we're pursuing the issues in court, which is clearly the most the strongest obstacle we have at the moment, because we have cases at the Court of Appeal. While we're pursuing that, we're also doing mobilization. We're also reaching out to key demographics like the young people, the women, and we are meeting with them. We are talking with the people on the ground. We are building back again from the base. Yes, we agree that the qualitative voices in our party have left, which were the people who were made by the quantitative voices, because people are made by the quantitative votes of people. But I mean, you do know that in Animal Farm, where you know that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. But when the quantitative aggregated and made the qualitative, most times the qualitative ignores the quantitative and begin to think that they made themselves. And so we're approaching a situation where, you know, like in 2023, we won elections in some states that were controlled by the opposition. And so we're coming back to say that, look, we're going back to the people. That's why it's not a coincidence that our name is People's Democratic Party. So we must take this party back to the people, and that is clearly the agenda that the Turaki-led administration is doing, and that's where we are. A rebuilding process is always a very strenuous process, but at the end, it will be worth it.
Okay, I think you've rather painted a rather rosy picture from the deeply fragmented state of the soul of the PDP, but I'll come back to that. You've been on the front line of accusing the federal government of weaponizing poverty. You've accused the federal government on this severally, shrinking the democratic space and all that. Now, we come to the elephant in the room, which is the tax reforms. You've said that that the federal government should not further tax hunger and poverty. But the reality, the federal government have said that this draft is a way towards economic growth, inclusivity, and shared prosperity. When we look at the details of these tax laws, it shows that some percentage of the people are going to be taxed on a lower rate. Can you respond to this? Because we need some more clarity on this matter.
Yeah, clearly, when you look at the tax law, the first thing we speak about is that any time where you need to enforce your taxes and the percentage is higher than 40%, then it shows there's a problem.
Sorry. I think we have the tax breakdown, if we could see it, so that the public could join us in this conversation. I don't know if it's ready, but if it's not, you could continue with your explanation.
All right, so I'm going first to the acceptability. I'm going first to the consciousness. As we sit here, I don't know if you have the act, because we've been looking for it and we are not sure of which version was signed. Yes, the National Assembly recently, particularly the Senate, said they had to re-gazette. So the re-gazetted copy, where is it? And so if this is a law that has operational jurisdiction over every single Nigerian who is working, then as of the point of implementation, that act is not in the hands of Nigerians. So it doesn't matter what the components are. The first thing is that when it has to do with compliance, even laws must be complied with from the point of faith and trust. And so when people are not certain, and you see, we can't sweep and make miniaturize the fact that, oh, some things were inserted. Even if it's a comma, there is a place you put, and I'm sure you're masters of the English language, and you know that a comma in a sentence can change the meaning of that sentence. And so we're expecting that the National Assembly and the federal government will come clean to say, these are the things that were inserted, and this is how they were inserted. Now, going to the particulars of it, irrespective of how good, how did we come to democracy? Go back to Greece. You would remember that the concept of democracy was the direct participation of people in their governance. And thereafter, you now had selection of people who are elected by the people. So that is now delegated representation. And therefore, the delegated representation must at all times be at sync with the people they are representing. To that extent, now, so if our legislative houses, especially the House of Representatives, Abdul Samad said that there are discrepancies between what was passed and what has been gazetted. That alone calls to question the practicability and implementability of that act. Now, when you go to the fact that, yes, there is need, no one is denying the need for the harmonization of the tax regime. Absolutely not. No one. But when you look at it, and again, this new tax regime is an amalgamation of several tax and finance acts previously in existence. And that sounds good. But you see, there are times when you don't just start an engine and run with it. You start allowing it to warm and get things to happen. So If you go on the streets and ask the average Nigerians who have the duty to pay these taxes, and I go to the issue of enforcement, if you have to enforce and you have to put your energy in enforcing more than 40%, then it shows that there is either a huge trust deficit in the system or the people do not believe in it. Because what is the system of taxing? People want to be sure that when they pay their money, that money is working for us. And at this point, if you do an independent analysis, and I'll ask that you do it, you see that there's a huge trust deficit already in existence prior to the tax law, and with the information coming from the National Assembly, it has exacerbated that trust deficit. And therefore, what we were calling for was to say, can we delay this a bit? Can we delay the implementation, sort these issues, and can we have an aggressive sensitization where the people will respond to it?
Let me come in here in the interest of time. It's been reported this morning that the federal government is spending $750,000 a month in Washington, D.C. to shape Nigeria's narrative, as well as counter separatist narratives in that part of the world. As a Nigerian, how would you react to this news?
Just in fact, the way you kept your lips when you were mentioning the amount, I can use telepathic communication to know how you even feel about it. I mean, it doesn't
matter what I feel. I'm just posing a question.
No, it does, because away from doing your work as a journalist, you're also a Nigerian. And so to that extent, so imagine how the average Nigerian who is struggling to feed, imagine how the small businesses who are struggling are feeling. And so you don't need to, and incidentally, the NIPR will be presenting the perception index, which is a huge study that has been done. You do not need to fund narratives, but you can, I mean, these are lived experiences of people. The Nigerians in the United States come back home, Nigerians in London come back home, Nigerians all over come back home. And the perception they exude, and again, we live on social media. So every day, when you aggregate, if you use AI and you check the perception of any place, you're going to aggregate the individual perceptions of people. When you aggregate that, it forms the general perception. So it doesn't matter what you're funding with PR, if you do not get the lived experiences of people to reflect that, it is going to show, it's going to be a wasted experience. Is going to be going down, huge resources going down the drain without anything. The best people who convey the perception of a country are the citizens of that country. And immediately things are working well in that country. So for example, I at the last MBA conference, the Minister of Interior was asked to make a presentation. I clearly saw the divide. People, the lawyers, they applauded the minister for his work, but they did not agree with him defending other parts of the system. I mean, that was clear-cut. People can perceive there are ministers in this country who are working, and when you get to that point, they don't need to fund the narrative. They don't need to get 600 people working on social media for them. I mean, that is any artificial funding or any artificial insertion that tries to change narrative usually doesn't work.
Okay.
The best thing is to get your citizens to feel good, and they will transmit that feeling to the world, and that forms the perception.
Okay, you've spoken a lot about a negative perception and a wrong narrative being put out there. What is the PDP actually doing differently to stop this bleeding before 2027?
We're holding government to account, because at the base of narrative is the action of government. Remember that the narrative is a result of action, reaction. Then you have the narrative. So how is government acting? Okay, we attended, I think it was a spokesperson conference, and the Minister of Information, my big brother, was speaking about how the citizens are abusing the country. And I said, well, I agree with that, but can we go back to when the country itself has abused the citizens? And at what point did it start? So when you're looking at it, the perception comes from an interaction between the government, the people, the processes. So
okay.
So if you enter a place, for example, like I came into this studio and I was warmly welcomed, and someone gave me a seat, and someone touched my face a bit, and I'm sitting in front of the car, and things are just working, there is absolutely no way you're going to ask me about our rights. I will be speaking by my lived experience. Okay. But if as at the time I came, even your gate man annoyed me, then I'll have to say it.
Thank you so much indeed for your contribution, Mr. Ememobong, the National Publicity Secretary of a faction of PDP. we'll get to know which
Well,
one
there's no faction. There's no
Okay.
faction. We're getting to that
But
point.
thank you for the insight you've made on a more sincere note, for making out time to be part of the live episode of Daybreak. That's all we have time for here on Daybreak. I'm Benga Ashu. It's goodbye from me.
And I'm Constance Ikoku. It's goodbye for me.
I'm Yolanda Robert. Please do keep it here on Arise News. The morning show is next. Goodbye.